My name is Don Lee Daniels. Some of you may remember me as Swami Jnanananda Saraswati. Whether you're watching this on YouTube, listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, I'm glad you're here, truly. For over 40 years, I've been exploring consciousness beyond the body through advanced meditation, conscious out-of-body experiences, and the awakening of Kundalini Śakti, the underlying force that the mystics of every tradition have always known. What you're about to hear is an issue of my newsletter, Listening at the Edge of Consciousness. If you're not yet a subscriber, I invite you to join us. It's free. The link is in the description below and in the show notes. What I want to share with you today is an experience I had recently that shows that meditation, higher states of consciousness can happen anywhere, anytime. So today I want to take you somewhere you may never have expected to find a spiritual teaching, a grocery store in Florida, and show you that pure consciousness is not waiting for you at the end of a long road of practice. It is here. It is now. And it's one breath away. I was in the grocery store the other day, picking up a few items. Nothing remarkable about the errand, when something began to happen that, after 40 years of practice, I no longer have to initiate. I found my breath was lengthening on its own. The mantra that has lived inside me for decades quietly resumed its rhythm. And I practice the Hamsa mantra, one of the mantras that I trained in for many, many years. Hum on the inhalation and sa on the exhalation. Hum means I, and sa means am. I am. I am. I am. And I was at the grocery store, just simply walking around grabbing groceries. And the grocery store, without changing at all, was becoming something extraordinary. Not because anything in the store had shifted. The fluorescent lights were still fluorescent. All the products were still engineered on the shelves to capture your attention. The other shoppers were still navigating their carts with the mild distraction of people running errands on an ordinary afternoon. What was shifting, though, was my awareness. It was expanding quietly, naturally, until I could see what was already there, had always been there, hidden in plain sight, consciousness, dancing in the grocery aisles, moving among the products, alive in the faces of every person I passed. Divinity wearing the disguise of an ordinary Tuesday. Actually, it was Wednesday. And this is what I've come to understand after a lifetime of practice. Every single day, every moment really, is an experience of the divine. The moment we begin to see the consciousness that lives inside every other human being, when that seeing opens, something happens in the heart. It expands. It recognizes itself in the other. And the grocery store becomes, without any exaggeration whatsoever, a sacred space. William Blake wrote many years ago of seeing the universe in a grain of sand, a heaven in a wild flower. He wasn't speaking in metaphor. He was describing exactly this, a mode of perception in which the infinite becomes visible through the surface of the ordinary. The grain of sand doesn't change. The wildflower doesn't change. The seeing changes, and with it, everything. This is what Hamsa, the Hamsa practice, becomes over years of practicing it. It's not something you do. It's something you are. The Sanskrit breaks it open, ham, as I said before. Ham from aham, meaning I, and sa, meaning am, the great I am, reverberating in every breath 21,600 times a day on average, whether you're aware of it or not. The mystics of every tradition have pointed at this same pulsation, and we'll come back to that later. Isaac Bentov, the Czech-American scientist and mystic, wrote a remarkable book called Stalking the Wild Pendulum, approaching this same truth from the direction of quantum physics. The universe itself moves in this ebb and flow, expansion and contraction, inhalation and exhalation, the pendulum swinging in both directions. But here is what Bentov understood, and what direct experience confirms from the inside. Most people know that the universe is made of atoms, and atoms are made of even smaller particles, constantly vibrating. A vibration is a pendulum swing, only at an infinitesimally small scale. And at the end of each vibrational swing, something extraordinary happens. The particle stops, and in that stopping, it winks out of three-dimensional existence entirely, back into pure consciousness, back into the field from which all matter arises. It only appears as a physical object when it's in motion, and when there is an observer present to perceive that motion. No movement, no observer, no three-dimensional object, just consciousness. Your thoughts work the same way. Your feelings work the same way. Your physical body, this sacred temple through which realization itself becomes possible, works the same way. All of it is energy, manifesting in a three-dimensional plane we have all agreed to call real, which means that the gap at the turning point of your breath, the dvādaśānta, the still point, the Shiva yogis mapped with such precision over 1,000 years ago in the Vijñāna Bhairava Tantra, is not a spiritual technique leading somewhere else. It is the same gap that matter itself passes through continuously at every scale of the universe. When you rest in that gap, you are touching the actual structure of reality. Not metaphor, physics. Direct experience, the same truth from three different directions. Direct experience reshapes your reality. And this is the core of everything I teach. At the natural turning point of each breath, the precise moment where the inhalation has completed itself and has not yet become an exhalation, and again, where the exhalation has emptied and has not yet begun to fill, there is a gap, a still point. It's not a pause you create. It is a pause that is already there, built into the architecture of every breath you have ever taken. If you can learn to rest in that gap, even for a fraction of a second, the ordinary mind stops. The chattering of your mind stops. Not because you forced it, because there is nothing to hold it in motion. The wave has reached the shore and has not yet turned back. In that stillness, something else becomes available. You already know this gap. You have felt it many times. You simply may not have recognized it for what it was. It is that aha moment, that sudden interior opening when something so unexpectedly beautiful stops you in your tracks. And you've had this experience before. A sunrise that you weren't prepared for. A piece of music that reaches into your chest and rearranges something. A painting that holds you in front of it longer than you had intended. Not because you're thinking about it, but because thought has momentarily ceased. The face of a dear friend you haven't seen in years, appearing suddenly, and your breath stops. It just stops. And in that stopping, something vast and luminous opens. That is the dvādaśānta. That is the gap, arriving not through technique, but through beauty, through surprise, through love recognizing itself across a room. Now, what makes art truly beautiful? What makes a sunrise open something in your chest you didn't even know was closed? It's not the colors, it's not the composition. It is that the experience momentarily suspends the thinking mind, and in that suspension, even for a fraction of a second, consciousness touches its own source. The heart expands, the aha arrives, and you stand there, breath caught, not knowing exactly what just happened, but knowing without any doubt that something real just occurred. The Vijñāna Bhairava Tantra, written over 1,000 years ago, saw it with equal clarity. In verse 118, it enumerates the moments when pure consciousness becomes directly available in ordinary life. The Tantra says, just before or after a sneeze, at the onset or cessation of anger, in fear, in deep sorrow, when fleeing from conflict or from joy, in curiosity or wonder, at the onset and cessation of hunger. In all these states and more, the state replete with being of the Absolute is available. This is from 1,000 years ago. Every involuntary movement, when the ordinary flow of thought is briefly interrupted, every gap, every aha, the sneeze, the fright, the sudden beauty, all of them creating the same still point that intentional breath practice cultivates deliberately. And in verse 73, the Vijñāna Bhairava speaks directly to the experience of music, which moves me greatly. The yogin, the practicer, who relishes music and song to the extent that he or she merges with it, becomes filled with unparalleled happiness, attains heightened awareness, and experiences oneness with the divine. Through effort, it's through that gap that beauty opens. It's the moment where the listener disappears into the listening. Now, these are not techniques reserved for monasteries and meditation halls, although you'll find monks working on them, as I did years ago. They are descriptions of something that happens to every human being. The moment a sunrise opens something in your chest, that you didn't know was closed, the moment the music reaches in and rearranges something, the moment you turn a corner and see the face of someone you love and you care about. The Vijñāna Bhairava Tantra is simply saying that moment right here is the door. It is a threshold. Learn to recognize it. Learn to rest in it. And learn to enter it consciously rather than stumbling through it accidentally. And it can be taught. What the practice does, what intentional, sustained attention to the breath and its turning points does over time, is take what happens to you accidentally in those aha moments and make it available deliberately. Not manufactured, not forced, but chosen, invited, entered consciously rather than stumbled into. The sunrise opens something in your chest you didn't know was closed, and for a moment you touch the infinite. The practice teaches you to rest in that gap, to extend that moment, to deepen it, to learn to live closer and closer to that threshold until it becomes not a peak experience occasionally visited, but a ground state, your default state, the permanent fragrance of an open life. This same practice, taken to the very edge of sleep, watching the breath, resting in the dvādaśānta, letting those still points lengthen, becomes the doorway into what the yogis called the Tandra state, that luminous threshold between waking and sleep where the deepest teachings arrive not as concepts, but as direct experience. But that is a full teaching for another time. As the breath lengthened and the still points deepened, something began to happen that I have come to recognize over decades of practice. The Ajna chakra, the center of the expanded perception located at the point between the eyebrows, began to open. This is not a metaphor. It is a felt experience, as distinct and recognizable as the feeling of sunlight on your face. It's a subtle pressure, a gathering of awareness at that point, and then there's a widening, at least for me, as though an aperture that is normally set quite narrow begins to open to a larger field. Now, what changes is not what you see necessarily. The fluorescent lights are still fluorescent. The products are still screaming for attention from the shelves. What changes is how you see and what becomes available to perception beyond the purely physical. People begin to register differently. It's not just as bodies navigating a store, but as fields, energy patterns, emotional textures, the quality of someone's inner state becoming perceptible the way temperature is perceptible. It's not seen exactly, but unmistakably felt. And it starts out subtle, and then you begin to pick up on things. A heaviness moving through the cereal aisle. There's a brightness near the flowers. The quiet grief of someone standing very still in front of a shelf, not really looking at what's there. You begin to feel everything. One of my teachers used to say very simply, see God in each other. 5 words, a complete teaching. But there is a world of difference between reading about or hearing about seeing God in each other and nodding along because it sounds spiritually correct, because you're supposed to believe it, and actually beginning to see it, actually feel it, actually knowing it in the way the science fiction writer Robert Heinlein meant when he coined the word grok in his novel so many years ago called Stranger in a Strange Land. To understand something so completely, so fully that you merge with it, that the knower and the known become one. There are times on the spiritual path when we look around at the apparent craziness of this world, its violence and noise and distraction, and we genuinely feel it. The sensation of being a stranger in a strange land. I've felt it, of having glimpsed something that most of the people around us haven't seen yet, and not quite knowing how to live in both worlds simultaneously. But here is what the path eventually reveals. This strange land is not foreign territory. It is your own consciousness dreaming itself into form. Every person in that grocery store, every product screaming for attention, every heaviness in the cereal aisle, and every brightness near the flowers, all of it, your own play of consciousness expressing itself in 10,000 forms for what it actually is. When that recognition deepens, not as philosophy, but as lived, felt, embodied knowing, the stranger disappears, not because the world becomes less complex or less challenging, but because nothing in it is truly foreign anymore. You begin to see everything in a different light, no matter what the circumstances. The craziness included, believe it or not. The negativity included. All of it held inside the same vast awareness that breathes hum and saw in your chest 21,600 times a day. When you truly begin to grok the consciousness living inside every person you pass, not as a belief, not as a spiritual aspiration, not as something you're performing because a teacher told you to or that you read, but as direct, immediate, undeniable knowing, something happens that no matter of belief can manufacture. There is an ecstasy that begins to well up in the heart. Not the ecstasy of excitement or emotional enthusiasm. Something far quieter and far vaster than that. It's a fullness, a recognition, the heart expanding to contain what the mind could never hold. And in that expansion, that aha, that inhalation of pure wonder, you are touching the same threshold we have been circling all along, the dvādaśānta of the heart, the gap where pure consciousness stands revealed not as a concept, but as the living reality it has always been. The store becomes a living field of consciousness, each person an expression of the same awareness breathing hum and sa in your own chest. I am. Now, here I want to pause and say something that I consider essential teaching, not a footnote, not a caution buried at the end. When you open up in this way, you must also learn to guard your energy. An open, flowing, energetic field is attractive to those who are depleted, angry, or carrying significant pain. This is not their fault. It is the nature of energy seeking equilibrium. But if you move through the world in an open state without awareness of this dynamic, you will find yourself drained in ways that are difficult to explain. You may feel inexplicably exhausted after ordinary errands. You may absorb emotional states that are not yours and carry them home without even knowing it. This is not a minor inconvenience. For those who are genuinely open, whose ajna, whose chakras are beginning to awaken, whose field is becoming permeable, it is something that requires real attention and practical wisdom. The New Testament contains a passage that has always struck me as one of the most honest descriptions of this dynamic ever recorded. Jesus, or as I love to call him, Yeshua, is moving through a crowd when he suddenly stops and asks, "Who touched my robe?" His disciples are baffled. There are people pressing in from every direction, but Yeshua is not asking about physical contact. He felt something specific, power flowing out of him. A woman who had reached toward him in desperate faith had drawn from his field and had been healed, and he knew it, not through sight or reasoning, but through felt awareness of the energetic flow. He felt the power move through him and out of him. And here is what is essential to understand about that moment. He was not depleted by it. Yeshua knew himself to be one with the Father, a clear, open channel for an infinite source of divine power moving through him into the world. What flowed out was not his personal energy to be spent and exhausted. It was the infinite Śakti of pure consciousness expressing itself through a human form that had become transparent to it. The flow was real. The source was inexhaustible. And this is the model. But it is not the starting point. It is the destination that practice moves us toward. Until we are rooted that deeply in the infinite source, until the channel is that clear and that stable, we must be practical and self-aware. We must know when our energy is being drawn upon. We must know how to return to center, to the breath, to the I am, to consciousness within, to that compassion that can flow outward without the center being compromised. The protection is not about closing down or hardening. It is not about becoming less open or less loving. It's about learning to give from the infinite rather than from the personal. Rooted in the source, in pure consciousness, you can move through a grocery store full of human suffering and human beauty, fully open, fully present, fully permeable, and return home with your center intact. And so I moved through that store, open, centered, breathing Ham and Sa, the ordinary chatter of my mind growing quieter and quieter, thinning like morning mist as the breath deepened and the still points lengthened, not drifting, entering, moving into that thought-free space where the noise of the conditioned mind falls away and something else becomes possible. The little chattering monkey mind that we all have grew still. And it is in precisely this quality of stillness, not in the busy associative chatter of the ordinary mind, that genuine, spontaneous arising occurs. Not a thought I was thinking, but I had an appearance, an image and memory of a dear friend arising on its own, clear and warm, in the quiet interior space that the practice had opened. Now, I've come to recognize this quality of spontaneous arising as one of the hallmarks of elevated consciousness. The synchronicities that emerge from this space are not accidents. They are not coincidences dressed in spiritual language. They are the natural expression of a field of awareness that has temporarily released its ordinary boundaries and begun to touch the unified field in which all of us, apparently separate, are actually moving together. Now, what happens next still makes my heart sing when I think of it. We had met in this very same store some months before, and our conversation had found its way, as conversations between certain people always do, to the things that matter most. My friend and I had been talking about a photograph of Sri Ramakrishna, a 19th century saint of India. And you may know the image. There's a picture of Ramakrishna where he's standing with one hand raised and the other resting on his heart, eyes closed, face utterly transported, and he is in samadhi, breath suspended, mind dissolved, consciousness absorbed into what he called the mother. That was his name for Kundalini, for the living force of the universe, for Śakti herself moving through and as all of creation. He entered this state constantly, spontaneously, not through effort, but through the overwhelming recognition of the divine in everything he encountered. A name, a song, a sunset, the thought of the mother. His breath would stop, his body would become still, and he would remain in that suspension. It's called kumbhak in Sanskrit, that arrived not as technique, but as grace, sometimes for hours. His kumbhak was not something he did. It was something that happened to him when consciousness recognized itself. And there is a story about Ramakrishna that I have always loved. There was a great yogi named Totapuri that had come to visit him. Now, Totapuri was the accomplished one, a master of traditional Patanjali yoga, disciplined, rigorous, capable of entering deep states of samadhi through years of sustained practice. By every external measure, he was the teacher. Ramakrishna was the devotee, the ecstatic, the one who wept at the thought of the mother and swooned into samadhi in the middle of conversations. But Totapuri's heart was dry. He could enter the deep states. He had mapped the inner territories with precision, and yet the ecstasy, the living flood of divine presence that moved through Ramakrishna like weather, unbidden, overwhelming, glorious, that he could not access. He watched Ramakrishna move in and out of samadhi with something between bewilderment and longing. Now, the story goes that Ramakrishna eventually touched Totapuri at the Ajna chakra, that point between the eyebrows where, as we were discussing, perception begins to expand beyond the ordinary. And something that all of Totapuri's years of technical mastery had not been able to unlock opened. The divine flooded in. Totapuri, the accomplished yogi, the teacher who had come to instruct, fell at the feet of Ramakrishna in ecstasy. Now, I love this story not because it diminishes technique. Technique matters. Practice matters. The years of showing up matter enormously. But it tells the truth about something that every serious practitioner eventually discovers. There is a dimension of this that cannot be forced open from the outside. It opens from within. When consciousness recognizes itself, when Śakti moves, when consciousness moves. All of us have different experiences along the way. We all have different entry points, different moments when the door opens and the flood arrives. But when you begin to touch divine ecstasy, even at its edges, even for a moment, nothing else comes close. Nothing else even compares to this divine ecstasy. I want to say something directly to those who come to these practices through curiosity rather than devotion, through the thrill of astral projection and out-of-body experience, through the adrenaline of multi-dimensional exploration, through simple fascination with the territory beyond ordinary waking consciousness. It doesn't matter how you enter. The experiences themselves become the teacher. And this is why I always say, direct experience reshapes your reality. Not belief, not philosophy, not someone's account of what is possible, and not just reading about it. It's your own direct, lived, undeniable experience, entered through whatever door, whatever threshold was open to you. And this begins to do something to you that nothing else can, quietly, irreversibly. Every genuine excursion beyond the ordinary boundaries of the physical self begins to show you from the inside that you are not what you thought you were, that the walls are not where you believe them to be, that consciousness does not end at the boundary of the body or the boundary of even this dimensional plane, the 3D plane. Each experience, even the ones that feel more like adventure than revelation, chips away at the foundational misunderstanding that has caused human beings to suffer since the beginning. The belief that we are small, limited, bound. We are not. We are pure consciousness, currently expressing as a human being. Currently, not permanently, not essentially. The human form is real, and it deserves care and reverence. It is also temporary. This body will age. It will eventually go. But what you are building through these practices, the direct knowledge of your own unlimited nature, that does not go anywhere. This is why the great Shiva declaration resonates so deeply within me. And the Sanskrit says, Siddhaha Swatantra Bhavaha. It's in the Shiva Sutras. A Siddha, or an awakened, realized being, lives in absolute freedom. And I would also add, absolute ecstasy. Not as a peak experienced, occasionally visited, but as the ground state, your default state of being. My friend and I had stood in that same grocery store and had laughed together about that photograph, not irreverently, but with the laughter of longing and recognition. This, we had both said, this is the state we both wanted and that we are moving towards. To move through this world, all worlds, seeing everything saturated with Śakti, with grace, eyes open, breath occasionally still, the scintillating blue light of consciousness visible everywhere, in the faces of strangers, in the ordinary objects of daily life, in the fluorescent lit aisles of a grocery store in Florida. Not the mundane world as something to transcend or escape from. This very world transfigured, lit up with divine consciousness, seen clearly for what it actually is. That conversation was alive in my mind as I turned the corner into the produce section. And there he was, looking up at me with a wide smile. We greeted each other with the particular warmth of those who know what is actually happening beneath the surface of things. And in that moment of recognition, his face appearing suddenly, unexpectedly, in the space my practice had already opened, something accelerated. The expanded state I had been moving through the store intensified in an instant. The mind, already quiet, went completely still. And what flooded in was not thought, not excitement, not the ordinary joy of bumping into someone you love, but something vaster and quieter than all of that. Great joy, ecstasy, the aha of two fields recognizing each other, each making the other burn a little brighter. This too is a dvādaśānta, an opening. The gap between one moment and the next, when the unexpected surprise of a dear friend's face stops everything, and in that stopping, pure consciousness stands briefly, luminously revealed. My heart was happy. There is something I want to add that I have not yet said. This dear friend, this well-known teacher whose work has touched millions, I first met him in 1978. He was already an established practitioner then, years into his own path, a devoted disciple of the great Swami Yogananda's lineage, older and further along the road than I was. I was not yet a monk. I was a young man whose kundalini had recently awakened with a force I had no framework to contain, consciousness blazing, out-of-body experiences arriving unbidden, flights into realms I had no map for. I was weeks away from selling everything I owned, my car, my plans, my idea of what my life was going to look like, for a one-way ticket to India. I needed to find a teacher who could help me understand what was happening to me, someone who had been where I was going. We met in that charged moment, his path already deepening, mine just catching fire. And then life moved the way life moves. Different roads, different teachers, different continents. I went to India, eventually took my vows, became a monk of the Saraswati order 2 years later in 1980. Each of us went further into our own tradition, following the thread wherever it led for decade after decade after decade. And then a grocery store in Florida, nearly 50 years later, two men who have actually lived the path, standing in the produce section, laughing about Ramakrishna swooning into samadhi. The young man who sold his Firebird, his car for a one-way ticket to India. The established practitioner who was already deep in his own tradition when they first met. Both of us somewhere closer now, perhaps, to what we always were moving towards. Different lineages, different decades, different rivers, arriving as they always do at the same ocean. This is what the path does. If you stay on it long enough, it brings you home, not to a place, to a recognition, to the understanding that the pure consciousness you were seeking out there in India and the ashram, in the years of practice and sacrifice and surrender, was here all along. It was you all along. Two old friends, the produce section, laughing, swooning a little, hearts full. What joy. Before enlightenment, chopping wood, carrying water. After enlightenment, chopping wood, carrying water. Lama Surya Das titled one of his finest books, After the Ecstasy, The Laundry. I love that title with everything I have because it tells the truth about where the real practice lives. Not in the cave, not on the retreat, not in the extraordinary moment carefully arranged for maximum spiritual effort. It's in the laundry. It's in the grocery store. It's in the errand that appears to have nothing whatsoever to do with anything sacred. And this is the understanding that grounds everything I teach and what happened to me in that grocery store. The breath lengthening on its own, the dvādaśānta opening, the ajna awakening, the field expanding, the spontaneous appearance of a dear friend, the ecstasy welling up in the produce section next to the organic carrots, was not a lucky accident. It was the natural fruition of practices I have been living for over 40 years. Practices that are available to you. The three core areas exist precisely because they work together, not as separate techniques, but as different expressions of the same awakening force, each one amplifying and igniting the others. So one, conscious out-of-body experiences, multidimensional exploration, begins to show you from the inside that you are not your body, not your mind, not the small and limited self you have been conditioned to believe you are. Every genuine excursion beyond the physical body chips away at that foundational misunderstanding. You return changed, expanded, less convinced by the walls. 2, advanced meditation. The deep states of Tantra, Turiya, Samadhi, Nirvana takes that expansion and gives it roots. The dvādaśānta, that opening of the gap we explored today, is a doorway, a threshold into these states. The still point between breaths. The gap where the ordinary mind releases its grip and something vast and luminous stands quietly revealed. These states are not reserved for just monasteries or ashrams or in spiritual retreats. They are available in the grocery store in Florida on an ordinary Wednesday afternoon. And Kundalini and Śakti awakening, the third core value that I talk about. The underlying force the mystics of every tradition throughout the world have known is the living power beneath all of it. The fire that was blazing in me when I sold my Firebird for a one-way ticket to India. The force that moves through Ramakrishna and stopped his breath at the thought of the mother. The energy that the Vijñāna Bhairava Tantra from 1,000 years ago has been mapping for so long. When this force begins to move consciously through your life, through your practice, through your breath, through your encounters in ordinary places, everything changes. Not someday, now. These 3 practices synergistically ignite each other. Out-of-body experiences opens the boundaries. Deep meditation increases that stillness, that awareness, and opens everything. Kundalini and Śakti provides the living fire that makes all of this possible. Together, they do something that no single practice can do alone. They begin to permanently reshape the way you experience reality. Not as a belief, not as a philosophy, as direct experience. So I say again, direct experience reshapes your reality. And this is the heart of everything I teach and what I want you to understand. In the newsletter issues ahead, we will go deeper into each of these areas. The mechanics of conscious out-of-body experience, the specific practices that open the deep meditative states, the signs and stages of Kundalini awakening, and how to navigate them wisely. We will continue to explore the extraordinary teachings of the Vijñāna Bhairava Tantra, the Shiva Sutras, and the living tradition of non-dual Shaiva Tantra, not as an academic subject, but as living maps for direct experience. The grocery store is full of Śakti, so is the laundry, so is your home, so is the perfectly ordinary moment you are living right now, reading these words or hearing these words or seeing this video. The door is never locked. The entry fee is a single conscious breath. None of it is ordinary. None of it has ever been ordinary. What I've shared with you today is not the end of the experience. It's the beginning of your direct experience of it. Don't take my word for it. Don't believe it because I said it. Go inward. Do the practice. Let the experience speak for itself. That is the entire point. That has always been the entire point. Direct experience reshapes your reality. That's the end of this issue of Listening at the Edge of Consciousness. The most important thing you can do right now is subscribe to the free weekly newsletter, Direct Experience, Ancient Wisdom, modern technology, and practical guidance for exploring consciousness beyond the body and deep within. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, please follow the show. And if this teaching moved you, a review helps more people find their way here. We're just beginning. Dive inward and fly free.